Remember Irina Zarutska, a Ukrainian refugee whose life was violently extinguished, then systematically erased from the national consciousness, much like the memory of Canon Hinant, a 5-year-old boy murdered with a bullet to the head, or Austin Metcalf, 17, executed with a knife to the chest. We never heard the widespread outrage for Andreas Probst, Thomas Creole, or Lola Davier, did we? Their names, their tragic ends, are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms. These brutal, chilling details, once deemed too insignificant for prime time by what I call the filthy trash press, reveal a much deeper malaise. These deaths are not mere minor news items. They represent an abominable fever gripping the body politic, and the very institutions charged with diagnosing the illness instead seek to break the thermometer. Yet, the true press, the voice of the people, enshrined in the American Constitution, is now us. The ultimate vulnerability, the single crack that could shatter this colossal edifice, has always been internal strife. No external force, no foreign army, no coalition of empires has ever threatened the sheer existence of the United States with the same devastating efficacy as its own internal divisions. The American Civil War stands as the starkest testament to this brutal truth. Its unfathomable toll of over 600,000 American lives eclipses the combined casualties of every other major conflict in which this nation has ever engaged, from the Revolution to the World Wars to the most recent engagements. This scale of self-inflicted devastation, a societal autoimmune response, has been mirrored in our contemporary era through different, insidious vectors. Consider the opioid crisis, a modern plague engineered by the avarice of Big Pharma, which has claimed more American lives than both world wars put together, illustrating a persistent vulnerability to internal mechanisms of self-destruction. This primal fear of internal dissolution, of a society turning inward and tearing itself apart, permeates our collective subconscious, manifesting powerfully in our cultural narratives. From the chilling dread of a hidden menace within a peaceful community in Jaws, where the danger stalks from beneath the familiar waves, to the terrifying breakdown of social order as neighbors turn monstrous in George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, where the threat arises from within the very fabric of humanity, and even to the ideological schism that pits heroes against one another in Marvel's Civil War, our stories consistently articulate a profound anxiety that the greatest threat to our survival will always emerge from amongst us, from the deepest fissures within our own shared identity. This constant cultural echoing of self-destruction is not mere entertainment. It is a subconscious recognition of America's unique historical vulnerability to disunion. The true architect of American political philosophy, Abraham Lincoln, standing before the Young Men's Lyceum of Springfield, Illinois, in 1838, offered a chilling prophecy about the existential threat facing this burgeoning republic. This man, whom history rightly remembers as the greatest politician of all time, delivered an address so prescient, so steeped in an understanding of human nature and societal dynamics, that its words resonate with profound clarity today. He declared, and I quote, "All the armies of Europe, Asia, and Africa combined, with a Bonaparte for a commander, could not by force take a drink from the Ohio. When then must we fear danger? I answer, if it ever reach us, it must spring up amongst us. As a nation of freemen, we must live through all time, or die by suicide." This was not hyperbole, it was an unequivocal statement of where the true peril for the American experiment would always lie, not from external conquest, but from self-inflicted wounds, from an internal unraveling. This nation, the United States, represents perhaps the most successful and ambitious experiment in 3,000 centuries of human civilization to forge a highly cosmopolitan yet profoundly functional society. Its very fabric is woven from threads of unparalleled global diversity. Consider the sheer scope of this demographic tapestry. Over 400 distinct languages are spoken within its borders. 22% of its population communicates primarily in a language other than English at home, and its citizenry hails from more than 200 different nations. Furthermore, every major world religion finds adherents here, including the largest Jewish diaspora since the time of Abraham. This confluence of cultures, beliefs, and origins is truly without historical precedent in its scale and integration. Throughout the vast sweep of human adventure, attempts at creating such diverse, integrated societies have flickered and often faded. We recall the grandeur of the Roman Empire, a vast melting pot of ethnicities and cults unified by law and infrastructure, the enduring legacy of Constantinople, a crossroads of civilizations for 1,000 years, the sprawling, albeit brutally enforced, cosmopolitanism of the Mongol Empire, and the intellectual beacon of Alexandria, whose great library symbolized the gathering of all knowledge under one roof. Each of these empires, in its own way, pushed the boundaries of human integration. Yet, the American model, with its voluntary immigration and civic integration based on ideals rather than imperial conquest, stands as the multi-millennial apex of this sublime progression toward a global brain, a dynamic confluence of disparate human experiences contributing to a shared, evolving project. Central to this unprecedented success, a framework that the aforementioned trash press consistently ignores, is a finely balanced strategic concept that I call the lighthouse and the fort. The lighthouse component represents the beacon of opportunity, the promise of unparalleled freedom, and the unparalleled reward for talent and industriousness that America has historically offered. Here, hard work is not merely recognized. It is amplified and rewarded more effectively than anywhere else on earth, coupled with the most robust public freedoms. Imagine a brilliant pastry chef toiling in a modest shop in Naples. In that context, they remain an exquisite local artisan. Transplant that same talent and ambition to the vibrant, entrepreneurial landscape of Las Vegas, and that individual can blossom into a multi-millionaire entrepreneur, building an empire. This magnetic pull attracts the Einsteins, the Teslas, the Musks of the world, drawing ingenuity and drive from every corner of the globe into its orbit. But the lighthouse cannot stand without the fort. The fort represents the unwavering enforcement of strict laws, the clear delineation of principles, and the severe, unwavering consequences for those who choose to violate them. The message is simple and absolute. Disrespect our laws, undermine our foundational values, and you will be removed. We witnessed this in the early 20th century with figures like Lucky Luciano, a notorious crime boss who, despite his entrenched power, was ultimately deported for his criminal activities, illustrating a past resolve to protect the integrity of the nation. Contrast this with a modern example like Singapore, often described as Disneyland with the death penalty, where even possession of just 3 tablespoons of cocaine can incur the ultimate penalty. This uncompromising clarity in its legal framework ensures that the fort remains impregnable, clearly defining the boundaries of acceptable behavior and swiftly ejecting those who threaten its foundational stability. The integrated structure of the lighthouse and the fort, once the robust framework of American success, is now undergoing a systematic, insidious erosion. These foundational pillars are being eaten away by unseen forces, gnawed at their very core by specific non-governmental organizations and influential interest groups whose agendas run contrary to the nation's long-term stability. One salient example of this systemic subversion involves foundations linked to George Soros, which evidence indicates have directly financed the electoral campaigns of up to 80 federal judges and prosecutors across the nation. This strategic intervention places critical judicial and prosecutorial power under an external, ideologically driven influence, effectively circumventing traditional democratic processes. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis directly confronted this dangerous precedent when he removed prosecutor Andrew Warren, articulating a crucial principle: our government is one of laws, not of men. He has publicly put himself above the law. The fictional strength of Don Vito Corleone in The Godfather lay in his control over a mere handful of judges, prompting Soros' infamous request for access to those judges you carry in your pocket like so many coins. Yet, the scale of alleged influence wielded by a Soros in our contemporary legal system appears to surpass even Don Vito's fictional reach by a factor of 10, fundamentally altering the bedrock of legal impartiality. The tragic demise of Irina Zarutska provides a stark, undeniable illustration of this crumbling fort. Her killer, Carlos de Juan Brand Jr., embodies the very systemic failure resulting from a judiciary compromised by undue influence and ideological laxity. His criminal record is a harrowing litany of repeat offenses: armed robbery, aggravated robbery, assaulting his own sister, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, resisting a public officer, and many more, resulting in no less than 14 different mugshots on file. Given this extensive history of violent and disruptive behavior, a critical question immediately arises. What exactly was such a demonstrably dangerous individual doing, freely moving within the public transport system of a major city like Charlotte? The decisive point of failure in this tragic sequence can be traced directly to an inconsequential judge named Thesa Stokes, whose documented qualifications did not even meet the elementary standards required to practice the simplest profession of a lawyer. Her decision to release Brand Jr. despite his voluminous history of law-breaking set the stage for Irina Zarutska's murder. This judicial leniency, the turning of a blind eye to repeat offenders, echoes Adam Smith's timeless observation from The Theory of Moral Sentiments: Amours, to pardon the guilty is to show cruelty to the innocent. Irina Zarutska, the innocent victim, suffered the ultimate consequence of this cruel pardon. Beyond this alarming erosion of judicial integrity and rule of law, the mainstream media itself plays a deeply complicit role, engaging in what can only be described as anti-journalism. This is a practice of deliberate obfuscation and narrative distortion. Consider CNN's remarkable talent for spinning events. When faced with an alleged assassination attempt on a former president, their headline offered a masterpiece of understatement and narrative redirection. Trump evacuated after falling during his rally, noises heard in the distance. Similarly, their coverage of Irina Zarutska's brutal murder offered this chillingly detached gem: how the journey of a Charlotte resident and a Ukrainian refugee culminated in a stabbing. Many's. This carefully constructed framing drains the event of all its inherent brutality and moral gravity, implying a bizarre, almost fated encounter, leading to a minor incident. Were it not for the stark, undeniable reality of bright red arterial blood staining the pavement, one might mistakenly believe they were reading a synopsis for a romantic comedy, perhaps a metaphorical Valentine's Day stabbing, rather than an account of a brutal, senseless murder revealing a profound societal sickness. The deliberate weakening of America's judicial fort and the media's calculated obfuscation are not random occurrences. They are symptomatic of a far more sinister and carefully orchestrated objective. These actions serve the ultimate design of saboteurs who actively seek to incubate a civil war within the United States. For these individuals and groups, this outcome is not an unfortunate side effect. It is the core plan. The alleged statement from Carlos Brand Jr., the man responsible for Irina Zarutska's death, offers a horrifying glimpse into this ideological programming. I got that white girl, then I killed her. She called me While the veracity of the claim about her utterance or the killer's mental state whether a lie or a schizophrenic hallucination, remains a subject of investigation. The underlying motivation revealed by his alleged words is chillingly clear. It compels us to confront a pivotal question. Who instilled in this individual's mind the notion that all white people were his enemies, that violence against them was justified or even mandated? This ideological poison, corrosive to the very concept of shared American identity, originates from specific, identifiable sources. It is disseminated by certain non-governmental organizations, amplified by select university groups, and articulated by academics, whom I unhesitatingly label as psychopaths occupying positions of influence in institutions like Harvard, who systematically inject society with heavy doses of the profoundly divisive and inherently fascist message, all whites are racist. This constellation of actors represents a dangerous amalgam. Some are undoubtedly useful idiots, unwittingly serving a destructive agenda. Others are profiteers, enriching themselves from the chaos they sow. Many are outright crooks, manipulating the system for personal gain. And a significant portion are pests who openly harbor dreams of dismantling the Union itself. Society, in this engineered conflict, becomes the victim. And much like in Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express, where every passenger held a knife, contributing to the demise, so too do these various bad actors collectively wield the ideological weapon. Anyone, through their platforms or teachings, who has propagated this profoundly fascist message, and I quote again, all whites are racist, has effectively armed both the hand and the deeply troubled mind of Carlos Brand and countless others. What makes this reintroduction of racial division so tragic is the historical context of its apparent conquest. By the end of the 20th century, cultural racism, as a pervasive societal force, had been essentially eradicated in the United States. Its symbolic burial was perhaps most powerfully articulated by Michael Jackson's iconic anthem, Black or White, a global declaration that skin color should be irrelevant to human connection and cultural appreciation. This era witnessed an extraordinary flowering of black artistic and professional achievement that transcended racial boundaries. We saw Eddie Murphy captivate audiences worldwide, not as a black comedian, but as the comedian, starring in films like Coming to America that celebrated a universal humor. Morgan Freeman, a true titan of cinema, was cast in The Shawshank Redemption as a character originally written as Irish, his race entirely incidental to his profound portrayal of Red, demonstrating a casting paradigm based purely on talent. Jim Jarmusch's Ghost Dog, featuring Forrest Whitaker, further exemplified this trend, presenting complex characters whose race informed but did not define their universal appeal. Samuel L. Jackson ascended to become arguably the most bankable actor in Hollywood history, his iconic presence sought after for every genre and demographic. These individuals and many others achieved their soaring success by the sheer force of their talent and universal appeal, existing in a cultural landscape where their racial identity was not a barrier, but merely one aspect of their multifaceted humanity. The systemic problem we confront today is that these profound historical gains are being deliberately undermined by individuals and factions actively preparing an interminable civil war for the West, a conflict they intend to ignite not through traditional class struggle, but through the highly incendiary and destructive lens of race. To navigate this carefully constructed landscape of division and deliberate decay, we must equip ourselves with a robust mental toolkit, a set of critical questions designed to pierce through the obfuscation. When you encounter news of a violent crime where the perpetrator is inexplicably released, ask one question: who engineered this judicial leniency, and what larger systemic purpose does their decision serve beyond the supposed letter of the law? When the mainstream press presents a narrative that feels strangely detached or incomplete concerning a significant societal event, ask another question: what crucial details are being deliberately omitted from this account? and whose pre-existing narrative does that calculated omission ultimately protect? Furthermore, when you hear blanket condemnations of entire racial or ethnic groups, when the insidious mantra of all of one group are inherently flawed echoes through media or academic channels, ask a third vital question. Who profits, politically or financially, from this amplification of division? And what potential unity or collective action does this manufactured animosity effectively prevent? America, a tapestry woven from global diversity, once heralded as the enduring zenith of successful human integration, now finds itself battling a metastasizing cancer from within, precisely as Lincoln presciently forewarned. The systematic dismantling of its legal fort, the purposeful blinding of its media, and the calculated injection of racial animosity are not accidental fractures born of organic societal tensions, but components of a deliberate, long-term campaign. This engineered decay, starkly evidenced by the forgotten names of victims like Irina Zarutska and the distorted truths that accompany such tragedies, threatens to reverse centuries of hard-won progress, pushing us towards the ultimate self-immolation. Understanding this mechanism, rather than merely assigning blame to individual actors, reveals a deeper game at play, a devil's gambit, where the ultimate prize is the fragmentation of the most successful multicultural experiment in human history into an interminable civil war of race. The architects of this discord wager that our internal divisions will inevitably be our collective undoing, but what if their insidious gambit relies entirely on our continuing unawareness? The unparalleled American experiment, once the zenith of human integration and a beacon of both opportunity and order, faces an unprecedented engineered attempt to weaponize its inherent diversity against itself. The slow but deliberate dismantling of its protective legal frameworks, the cynical manipulation of its informational arteries, and the insidious reintroduction of corrosive racial dogma are not random failings, but precisely targeted operations designed to fracture the very bonds of civic trust. This systematic undermining, evident in the obscured injustices and narrative distortions we have analyzed, aims to turn the foundational strength of multiculturalism into its greatest weakness, replacing organic evolution with manufactured chaos. The ultimate question, therefore, is not whether these forces exist, but whether a people, once united by a shared vision of liberty and law, possess the collective cognitive immunity to reject the divisive narratives actively being programmed into its very soul, or if the internal forces Abraham Lincoln warned of will finally achieve what no foreign power ever could. If this deep dive into the underlying currents of societal manipulation has resonated with you, I invite you to engage with these concepts beyond this video. Share your own thoughts and observations in the comments below, or consider spreading this analysis to others who might benefit from a critical lens on the challenges facing our collective future.